Hello, Eddie. Hello, Mike.
Oh,
Hi, Eddie. Hi, Caio.
First question, are you an iOS developer?
yes, I'm an iOS developer.
For how long?
For up to 5 years, I think.
So mid, senior?
Something between mid and senior.
Awesome. How can we help you?
You can help me by answering a few of my questions and by helping me passing some interviews, maybe.
Awesome.
Okay.
First question.
First question would be, let's say we have an e-commerce app. How would you design the model and the architecture, and what architecture would you choose and why?
Mhm.
Okay, so e-commerce app. Which architecture would you use and why?
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Oh, first of all, it depends because there is no one architecture that fits every e-commerce application. Right? Every e-commerce application has its own goals, its own needs, its own constraints. So the role of software architecture, right? So what is the goal of software architecture? We have a series here in the channel, Clean iOS Architecture, part 1 to 7. I recommend you watch it because we explain in detail the role of software architecture, how it fits with iOS applications, how to think, how to design the architecture, and depending on the goals you have in the application. So I recommend you watch this, take notes. For now, what is the goal of software architecture? In short, maximize software delivery, reducing cost or effort to do so. Right? That's the goal of software architecture. Maximize software delivery, reducing effort or reducing cost. And in short, get more done with less effort.
Yeah, continuously as well, right? Not just once, but continuously keep doing that. Keep doing so.
So to do so, you need to do it, right? Based on the requirements of the project. So good software architecture guarantees you can deliver more work aligned with the business goals. It needs to be aligned with the business goals. That's why I say, if a company comes to me and say, hey, I want to build an e-commerce app, how would you design it? I would start asking questions about the business because I need to understand the business goals because the software architecture will be aligned with those goals. Now you need to guarantee the business goals and needs are achieved following strengths and quality requirements. For example, they might say, well, we want this application to work offline. It's completely different than an application that doesn't need to work offline. It is only online. This is one constraint or a quality requirement they may have as the business goal. It should work offline. The whole application, only the checkout should be online. You should have A/B testing, for example, to be able to test new ideas and see which one converts more in the e-commerce app. And all of this has nothing to do with MVC, it has nothing to do with MVVM, it has nothing to do with Viper, it has nothing to do with MVP. The way you're going to design the architecture for application is going to be based on the goals and needs of the business.
Exactly. It's how you structure your whole code base, excuse me, to accommodate these needs and goals. Yeah.
So it would be good to ask questions, to know more about what they want.
Yes. This is part of the interview. If I'm running an interview, in the beginning, I might be a little bit vague just to see if the candidate will ask questions, because you want to see like what is their process of solving challenges. Because the most important thing when you're solving a challenge is that the first thing you need to do is to understand the challenge really well. If you don't understand the challenge, you're not going to come up with a good solution. So sometimes interviewers are vague on purpose. Like, how would you build an e-commerce app? Just to see how you're going to react to that. Sometimes this is an invitation for you to start asking questions. Can you tell me more about this e-commerce app? For example, what kind of features would we have in the app? And you start from there.
Exactly. What are you selling? Like, first of all.
Let's say we create an app for people to sell their items, and for other people to like ads with items that I want to sell, and you're looking for something, and you can talk with me about an item I'm selling.
Mm-hmm. Like a marketplace.
So it's a marketplace. You can list items. You can buy items from other sellers, right? So you are both a seller and a buyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a marketplace now. Okay. So we have more information now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can list items or sell items, and you can buy items. Then you need to start asking, anyone can sell? Anyone can buy?
Yes.
Okay. And go back to the diagram here. So to start with, you can start creating some very, very high level diagrams of the architecture, not even looking like component level classes, but looking at like how this system will interact with other systems, right? So very high level can design here like app. Take this black box, an application. You need to ask now, how do I create a listing? And the interviewer might say, well, we're going to have a backend where you can send a post request, right? Say, okay, now you have a second system now. You have this backend. Let's say the seller backend. Or API. Seller API. Is the same API you can sell and buy and say, no, there's another service that actually does the buy side, So you have the buyer API as well. So you start seeing like how this system communicates with other systems. Does it receive data from the system, or does it send data to this system? Right? So here it's both, right? Because it needs to, let's say the buyer app actually, it sends requests, like buy something.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you have a listing API as well.
Yeah.
You consume data from, for example. So go to the listings API and say, hey, give me all the listings of things I can buy. And then when the customer want to buy, you're going to go and send an API request to the buyer API.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes.
So in a very high level, you try to understand how many systems we will interact with.
Like another question you can make is it going to be only a single app? Maybe there are two apps. Maybe there's a buyer app, maybe there's a seller app.
Let's say we have one single app, and the buyer and the seller use the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you see the difference that by asking these questions, maybe they're going to say, yeah, they are two different apps. Right?
Yes,
and then
of course.
The design changes, the architecture also changes. Because sometimes you have two different apps, the buyer and the seller, but you want to share the authentication module between them, because it's the same, like the login module, for example, right?
Mhm.
And all of these, like, it's how you're going to design your application. Are you going to create independent modules? Are you going to create a monolith? All those decisions are made depending on the requirements.
Yeah. So it's a discovery process, initially gathering more information about the business, the domain, the tech they have. Yeah. So it's a fine
And
start.
if you have two apps, how would you share the credentials between the apps?
Yeah, you can have a shared module there.
You can even share you can have a shared keychain group,
Mhm.
for example. We both share. This is something you can do. It can be a separate module.
Yeah.
They might say, well, we want the listings. If you loaded the listings once, we want you to cache it for, I don't know, 48 hours. So the app works offline. You can browse around offline. Let's say if you're in the tube, you can still browse what you want, add things to favorite, So when you're back out of the, I don't know, the metro, you can continue your purchase and you list all your favorites in there. So the app should work offline, So we're going to have some kind of caching in the app, right? Some kind of, let me create another color here. Yeah, let's say the listing cache, for example. Just very, very high level. Because then you're going to start structuring your application based on the needs and requirements and how many systems they're going to operate with, like they're going to communicate with.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a very zoomed out view, right? And then you can start zooming in.
Because following constraints and quality requirements. If you say, oh, you want to list the APIs, the app to work offline, it has nothing to do with MVVM, MVC, MVP. Again, right?
Yeah, not yet, at least.
Yeah. MVC, MVVM has its place there in the UI side. But if an interviewer, like for me at least, if I'm interviewing someone and I ask like, hey, let's design an e-commerce app, let's think about an architecture. And if the candidate tells me, let's use MVVM, without asking any of these questions, for me, it's like, oh, they don't understand the role of architecture in a bigger picture. They're more focused on the UI side of the application side. And that's fine, that's fine. Like I wouldn't, depending on the role, if I'm not looking for an architect, I wouldn't be expecting someone to understand like the super high level views. But if you're looking for like a senior lead developer architect level, then you start looking at this kind of more high level view, and then you start zooming in each of those components here. And inside of each of those modules here, you can have classes, structs, protocols, and things like that to support the needs of the application. It needs to work offline, for example. It needs to share the keychain, like the authentication with another app. It needs to have some shared modules between these two apps. Like, for example, maybe the UI needs to be exactly the same because you want the branding to be consistent between these two apps. So then you need to create here also a shared UI components. Maintain branding, to keep the branding exactly the same in both apps. So you do things once and you reuse them across applications. So this is the high level view, right? Does it make sense?
Yes, sure.
And all of this, you're going to find out this by asking questions to the interviewer, And then you're going to come up like with requirements on the spot just to see how you adapt to the changes, because your architecture needs to adapt to change, right? It should support the business goals and needs following constraints and requirements, right? So it should provide more productive ways to develop, maintain, extend, test, and deploy the app. And productivity being deliver more with less effort. And unfortunately, there's no one architecture that provides this for any kind of project. It really depends. That's why I don't like templates like Viper or other templates, because they don't solve your specific use case the way you need to. It tries to fit your problem into a template rather than you designing your application to solve your specific problem based on the goals and needs of the business. I know that this may be very high level and it doesn't make much sense at this point. That's why I told you to check out the Clean iOS Architecture, part 1 to 7, where we explain this in detail with diagrams as well. We show code as well. And yeah, so this is the role of architecture: guarantee the business goals and needs are achieved following the constraints and quality requirements of the project. Right? It should provide productive ways to develop, maintain, extend, test, and deploy the application based on the goals and needs of the business. So architectural decisions are like, how do you structure your components or your modules? What are the responsibilities of each of these components? How are they related? How do they communicate? Where are the dependencies pointing towards? And in a strategy, an overall strategy to control the evolution of those modules, of those dependencies, of those components. So that's the role of software architecture. Going beyond the MVVM, MVC, MVP patterns. Of course, making all those decisions based on the business goals and needs, following the constraints and quality requirements. So this is called usually a context diagram, to check the integration with other systems and some high-level needs. And you just like here, and then again, you zoom into the application. And inside this application module here, let's say, here you have your MVVM or your MVC, in the UI side of the application.
Yeah.
But that's like very, very zoomed in. And here you can have your view controllers. If you have a checkout view controller, a checkout view model, a checkout view. Now we have a checkout service, something like that. And maybe this checkout service talks to the checkout API. But the MVVM is just a small detail inside your application. It is not the application architecture or the software architecture chosen. It's only using the app side. Make sense?
Yes, I think so. But for example, why did you choose to use MVVM in this case and not, let's say, MVC?
It's just an example.
That's the point.
It doesn't make a difference. MVVM and MVC in the overall architecture, if it's implemented well, they both work very nicely.
So a good answer will be that it's not necessary to choose a perfect architecture. Like there's not a perfect architecture to fit a right app. It depends on the other details, like services, like.
Yeah, it depends on the app needs, and if you break down your application, you make it very modular and you design it well in a high level, then it really doesn't matter if I use MVC, MVVM, or MVP or Viper, whatever you want to use in the application side. it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
Because it's all well structured. But that's not what a specific interviewer is looking for. That's what I would be looking for when I'm interviewing people. Maybe the person you're talking to, they want to listen you say MVVM because they prefer MVVM. It's their personal preference, right? So you never know what the interviewer wants. That's why you need to have a conversation with them and try to figure out what they're looking for, you know? Not everyone looks at architecture the way we explain in this channel. Not everyone think of architecture as existing to guarantee the business goals and needs, you know, following constraint and quality requirements. Not everyone follow this definition. We follow this definition that we learned from our mentors, from people that we trust in the industry, you know, and not everyone follow that. For some people, an app architecture is MVVM or MVC or MVP or Viper, but that's not how we see architecture at Essential Developer. Make sense?
Yes, I was thinking that it's a subjective subject. It's
Yes.
not like...
Yeah. I was about to say before that if the job listing asks for MVVM, you know, and you go there and you argue that MVP is better, you know, like I use MVP. I don't know. You know.
Yeah. When I join a company and they are using MVVM or they're using MVP, I just use what they're using, you know, because it doesn't make that much of a difference. I wouldn't fight for a specific design pattern in the UI side. But again, this is my view of software architecture that I learned from other software architects. And we believe that this is the role of software architecture, even in your application. And MVVM and MVC, they live there in the UI side in a tiny, tiny portion. We explain this all in detail in this series. I highly recommend you watch it.
Yeah, I will.
And if you have questions, send there on YouTube. We reply to everyone.
Sure.
Remember, I recommend you work for companies that care about architecture like this. It's usually companies where they care more about testing and doing things, you know, the proper way and having automation in place and having continuous integration and continuous deployment and providing training for the teams, you know, which will help you grow as a professional in the long term. So see it as a filter as well.
Yeah, for me.
Do you have any other questions?
This kind of interviews?
Absolutely. Many times in my career. You go to interviews, especially for high-level senior positions, you have design interviews. And they're going to ask you questions like, how would you design a distributed system or an e-commerce marketplace with a bunch of like microservices? You know, they really push you like the limits of your knowledge. You know, they want to know if you know how to make decisions, how to think about constraints, how to think about reliability of services. I went to interviews as an iOS developer. They would ask me to design backend systems, you know, in the interview at a high level, right?
For example, how would you list the methods on the API side?
No, but how would I would structure the architecture of like a microservice distributed system for a messaging platform, you know, that can scale, for example, that can be distributed into many systems rather than having a monolith that does everything.
But let's say, for example, you get a question like, let's take an app we know, I don't know, Instagram, for example, and let's say you have to implement the stories part. Let's say it doesn't exist and you have to implement it. Can you maybe explain how would you do that inside of an existing app?
Stories on Instagram, how does it work?
So everybody can share a story for 24 hours. It can be a movie, it can be a picture. or a text.
Text as well.
You can hide it from some people. You can delete it.
Edit. Delete.
You can either upload or make it with camera. Take it.
You can either upload an existing
You can.
video or you can record one. Right?
Yes.
Okay, what else?
I think that's all.
Okay, so let's think about components high level. What we have here. We have UI, right?
Yes.
Need to design. What else? We need to send this at some point through an API, right? Upload.
Yes.
Upload. So you have the creator side, right? And the consumer side.
Right.
You have the creator, okay, side. And you have the consumer side.
And
Make
there
sense?
is UI as well. Yeah.
So this is one way you can start separating this feature already into two. When you are creating one, it's different than when you are consuming a story, right?
Yes, sure.
So on the creator side, you have a UI, right? You can upload to a specific API. What else can you do?
Edit and delete.
Edit, delete, record live. It's the same as the UI, right? Upload or UI.
Yes.
Let's keep it simple here. What does it mean hide from some people?
For example, I want to share my story and I don't want you to see it. I want only Mike and some other people to see it, but I don't want you to see it.
So is it actually hiding from people or only enabling it for some people?
Yeah, you can see it like this. But for example, if you go public, I only want to hide it from some people. So it's public and I don't want you to see it.
Okay, can you do that?
I'm not sure on Instagram, but let's see, you can do that.
Okay. This is just a selection in the UI probably when you are creating.
Yes.
So you can share a story for 24 hours.
Do you have access offline?
Probably. It's cached, right? So if you're offline, you can still use the Instagram app.
I think so. Yes. Let's see. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, to create, you need to be online.
Yeah.
Not really. You can create one.
You can queue
and upload to our...
Yeah.
Offline support. Consumer side as well. Offline support. And you have some UI. Also, the first thing you need to do is to set out like the requirements and break down into different components, right? So to be able to work offline, for example, you shouldn't depend on an API for it to work, right? You can design the whole UI. The UI shouldn't know about network components. You shouldn't have like URL session in your view controllers, for example, right? Make sense?
Yes.
So let's think about this high level.
Yeah.
Let's say now we're talking about the stories feature. So probably have a create story view controller with the filters there, right? What else is view controller needs to do? Not view controller, but let's say UI. Create
Yeah.
story UI. What are the requirements this UI has?
So you have options to upload or to take it, to record it.
But for example, hide from some people, which means you need to have a list of people, right? That you can hide from,
Yes.
for example. So it needs to consume some kind of like, say, people API, right? You also need to be able to communicate with an upload API, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you need to have a way of uploading the image when it's ready. You need to have this great story UI that will help you, for example, take a screenshot and then you can put some text on the screen. You can rotate it, you can do whatever, and then you take a screenshot of that image, right? So you need some kind of image processing module, right?
Yeah.
Do all of that, decouple it from the UI. You need a people API to fetch and show a list of people, and they can select and say, don't show to this one, they'll show to this one, they'll show to this one. Now, share story for 24 hours. That's up to the backend to decide, right? You're going to share it, and
Probably,
at some point it's going to disappear from the feed, right?
Or
Yes.
if you want to select like an option there, can I?
For Legend 24.
Yeah, something like that. So
you're going
that
to
should be.
need some kind of story model to have something like an expiration date, right?
Yes.
You may have an image, a video, or text, right? So let's say some kind of media. You can edit or delete. So what could you be able to edit? Can you edit a story?
If you have, I don't know. If you have media, maybe you want to edit the text.
Can you change the text? I don't think you can. You need to create another image, right?
But maybe that's
I'm not
a whole
sure.
different thing, you know.
Okay,
This
let's
is
say you
create.
can. Let's add here text string, right? And you need a method update text. If there's any rules based on this text, for example, you can only update the text in the first 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you cannot do the text. Then this rule should be in the story entity. Make sense? So you have here your entity that represents the story. And you can upload. So you can create a upload service. You need to get a people, right? So you need a people service to get a list of people. It's a people service. And then in the UI side, you need an image processing thing. Probably a video as well, right? It's a video one.
Yeah.
Doesn't need anything special. And you need the UI. So those are the kind of components you will need. What else do you need here? So we say you can edit, delete.
Offline support. So you need a database.
So maybe you can call this story service, and it can load story, or you can delete story. Sense? Here you can, I don't know, fetch people. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so this is for the online part. You should also be able to create all of this offline. So in the implementation side, let's say this is the service here is just a high-level abstraction, like a protocol, for example, or a class or a struct. Okay, so here we have the abstraction, and then we need to cache, let's say, the story. We don't need a cache service. What we could do instead is to have a local story service implementation that operates locally, with a cache. You can call this maybe a core data. Let's do a core data story service. Then you can have a online. Yeah, let's say online and offline. Different implementations of this protocol. Let me get an implementation thing here. Make sense? So we have two implementations of this service here. One that is offline and one that is online. And we can create actually a composite story service composite and compose the two of them. Now, Caio, how can I use a composite? Here, iOS architecture part 1 to 7.
I think I saw one of them, and I know what's composite.
Yeah, so pretty much a composite. You can have a list of services, and it delegates the messages to all of the services in the composite. So he implements the protocol and also has an instance of services or many services. So when you send a message like upload, it will send to both the offline and the online at the same time. And the application always interacts with the local one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is the creators implementation, for example, right? Very high level. You have a story service, but you need to have offline capabilities. So then you have an offline service. So as you can see, the UI doesn't need to know that there is an offline service, that there is a database, that there is this behavior. You go to the UI, the user is going to fiddle around with the text, with the video, it's going to put text, rotate it, say, I'm happy, it's going to process the image or the video, generate some data model here. And then through the service, you say, hey, story service, upload this story. And it's going to do it, going to put it in the offline story service.
Yeah. Just as a note here, the MVVM part or the MVP part, it will be in this last box there. Can
here.
You see?
Yeah, I see it.
Can you see why we don't like saying that these are architectures? Because they're a very, very small part of the whole structure, of the whole code base.
Yeah, they live here. Because if you structure your application as only MVVM, what's going to happen is that it's going to say, okay, I have image processing. Where should I put it? Should I put it in the view model? Should I put it in the model? Or should I put it in the view controller? Or if you use MVC, the same thing. Like, where should I put the image processing? Where should I put the service? Where should I put the offline logic? Where should I put the online logic?
Yeah.
And those are the questions that you need to start separating, from the UI. Because all of these here can then be reused on the Mac OS application if the business wants as well. It can be reused on an iPad application with a completely different UI implementation. It can be used on the watch. I don't know, it can be used anywhere. This is agnostic of the UI.
Yeah.
Can even give the UI another color. Okay, it's another thing. This is like domain level services and entities. If there's any rule related to the story, business rule, should be in the story entity. Any needs you need here to create and upload and delete, things that needs to talk to infrastructure details, you define as a domain service abstraction. Then the infrastructure implementations will deal with core data, will deal with URL session, Alamo Fire, whatever you're using. And the UI can be in a separate module as well. And the image processing, video processing can be also completely decoupled from platform, right? You shouldn't depend on iOS. You can do image processing that can be reused on the macOS. Make sense?
Yes.
So this is how I would start designing the application. Thinking about the needs, dispatch people, maybe you have only an online implementation of it. Let's say it doesn't work offline. You just say, yeah, this one doesn't need to work offline. Fantastic. Then you have only the online people service, for example, or friend service. I don't know how to call it.
Yeah.
No, but separating concerns. So you have the domain centralized there, agnostic of platforms. Then you have something more specific with image and video processing. And then you have the UI that could be implemented with either UI kit, Swift UI, app kit.
Yeah.
But all of this here, it's reused across applications, across platforms.
Yeah. Also, notice how the arrows point towards the purple box. There is no arrow from the purple box towards the implementation side, right? This is the dependency inversion principle in practice here in this diagram. This is what allows you to achieve modularity basically in your system. And what Caio is talking about deploying in different platforms with essentially exactly the same modules.
And this is the creator side, as an exercise, you can start doing the consumer side, where you're going to have also services, right, to fetch the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend you have, so this is a creator, let's say, story service. You have another protocol,
Consumer.
the creator side, a consumer story service, for example. But maybe the same service implemented, but that's an implementation detail.
Yeah.
Implementation detail no one needs to know about. Because maybe here, when you go to the story service to consume stories, when you create a story, and even before it's uploaded, if you go back to your Instagram feed, you can see your story there. Right? It could be part of fetching it from the offline service, for example, or from the Composite. It can be from the Composite as well. And here you would have, fetch that will return some array of stories, right? Something like that. Of course, asynchronously. Stories.
Why would you interact with offline story service and online story service and not only with Composite?
No, you interact with the abstraction here, right?
Because maybe one of them it's only for...
Mm-hmm. That's a composition detail if you want to load it only for the offline store or not.
Yeah.
But here it's the same,
Yeah.
You can compose the story service with the Composite as well. And then the Composite may decide, like, you can have a fallback strategy, like, first try to get it from online. If it fails, then you load from the offline. Or you do the opposite, load from the offline storage. If the cache date is older than 15 minutes, then load again from the online. Because maybe one of the requirements, remember, business goals, requirements, and constraints is that you shouldn't make API requests. You should only make another API request after 10 minutes to avoid, bombarding the server with many requests. Like, this is part of one of the constraints and quality requirements of the application, So it means that you need to have this local caching there. And the strategy is first load from offline. If the cache is older than 10 minutes, then you also load from online and you refresh the cache. Otherwise, you stop there and you don't use the online service to save bandwidth. It helps reduce the cost in the backend side. All those decisions will come with time. The more the business scale, the more these kind of decisions will make a huge difference in the project, in the product, in the deliverability, in the reliability of the systems, in the cost of maintaining the whole operation. So this is what architecture is about. The decisions we will make will come from the needs of the application, not from the UI needs only.
Yeah. Or the paradigm, OO functional stuff. Like it's completely agnostic of those things.
Yeah, start with a high-level view of how the systems operate, and then you zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, always with in mind the business goals, needs, constraints, quality requirements, and so on, and trying to maximize productivity. Adapting to change, welcoming change. It cannot be 100% future-proof. It's impossible. We don't know the future.
But you can try to.
You can try, yeah. You need to understand the roadmap of the project as well, right? Because decisions you're going to make, if you know the roadmap roughly, you can make decisions now. They're going to save you a lot of time in the future. For example, you can say in the beginning of a project, we want offline support, but we know it's going to take longer to build it. So we're going to go without offline support in the MVP, in the first release of the application. But this doesn't mean you can already create this abstraction here. So in the release V2, you just need to implement the composite and the offline service and compose them, right? And put the fallback rule here, policy here for the cache. Because you already prepared the system for V2, because you know that V2 will have offline support. Yeah. So it was a decision you made now, right? To allow a requirement that you have in the next release.
Yeah, sorry, Caio.
So it depends if you have a good roadmap, actually.
Oh, yes. You normally don't.
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we normally don't have a good roadmap. But the more involved you are in business decisions, go to the meetings and understand like what is the goal of this application, like this business, what they're about, the long-term goals. Like it helps you make decisions that are more assertive.
Yeah.
And then you keep restructuring your application, and this design is going to change, because the needs will change. They will change a lot. And the system needs to be flexible. You should be able to add the stories without breaking existing features, right?
Yeah.
So good separation of concerns, solid principles. And when you think about architecture, remember that architecture is about the business goals and needs. There's no perfect architecture. There's no one solution that solves it all. If there was, everyone would be using it.
Yes.
But unfortunately, there isn't. Or fortunately, right? Which makes our work more valuable, more creative, more exciting as well.
Now I understand why software developers should be involved in the business meetings. Because I was really wondering why would you go to that.
To understand the roadmap.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Because in those meetings, they're making decisions that will change your life. It's going to make things harder or easier for you. So it's important to understand what's going on.
I'm thinking if they think about that, in the business meeting, let's invite the iOS developer. Maybe we would help them.
Probably not.
Yeah, I think the same.
But it doesn't need to be the whole team that goes to those meetings, right? Get the team lead, Usually the team tech lead goes there and bring the knowledge to the team. This is one of the roles of becoming a team lead, a lead developer. You start being involved in those decisions. Go there with your notebook, take notes, and then share with the team and help them, make good decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be every developer in the meeting as well. It's not going to help.
No, of course. But isn't sufficient to only get the requirements or the next task, and maybe you don't know what will happen after a few months.
Absolutely, it helps.
Yeah.
So that's it. Clean iOS architecture part 1 to 7. Actually, we have much more videos about it. We have podcasts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out. It's going to help you prepare for interviews.
Yeah.
We released a mentoring session this week about concurrency, and there is also, they ask a lot in interviews, about concurrency, threading. Check it out at our website. And I recommend you start looking at architecture with, more high level as well. Read some books about architecture. We also have book suggestions. Check it out. It's going to help you grow as a developer, become a tech lead architect.
Any other question?
I don't think I have. It helped me a lot.
Okay, awesome. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, Eddie, for joining us.
Thank you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.